Imagine Seneca, the Stoic statesman and philosopher, at the end of a life marked by power, controversy, discipline, and reflection, addressing a final letter to those who remain. He is not writing in haste or with resentment, but with the measured clarity of one who has looked upon the arc of existence and found a way to articulate its meaning. Before we proceed, if you find value in reflective explorations like this, insights distilled from the lives of history's greatest minds, consider subscribing now so you do not miss future episodes. Your subscription helps sustain the work of bringing carefully crafted philosophy to a wider audience, and it ensures that these conversations continue to unfold where they are most needed. If the wisdom of Seneca and the practical guidance of Stoicism resonate with you, take a moment now to subscribe and join this community of reflective readers and seekers. This message is not a mere interruption. It is part of the invitation Seneca offers, to choose deliberately what we attend to, and to take action while time remains. In imagining Seneca's last communication, we do not pretend to possess a literal final letter beyond what history has preserved. Instead, we consider the culmination of his teaching as it might be condensed into one concluding address. For Seneca, death was not the catastrophe it appears to many. Rather, it was the horizon that renders life's path visible. With the end in sight, all trivialities fall away. What remains is the discipline of freedom, to be indifferent to what does not depend on us, to cultivate character, to conciliate the mind's turbulence, and to offer aid to others without clinging to outcomes. He would begin by reminding us that the time we possess is not a vague, unlimited field, but a precious, finite allotment. It is not to be hoarded as an anxious miser hoards coins. It is to be invested in the work of living well. He would write first about time, because so much of human suffering arises from either running ahead of it in anticipation or lagging behind in regret. He might say, "You complain of scarcity, but you spend lavishly on resentments, distractions, and the imagined judgments of others. You are generous with your hours to those who have earned nothing from you, yet forget to grant a moment to your own orientation. Resolve then to treat time as a sovereign asset. Make a ledger of your days. What must be done? What ought to be understood? Whom can you help? What can you release?" You will find that the mind becomes serene, not by fleeing obligations, but by focusing on those duties that align with reason and virtue. He would then speak of the inner citadel, not a fortress of stone, but a discipline of thought. Your joy, he says, is vulnerable only to what you permit within the gates. The world will bring setbacks, slander, delays, and losses. None of these by themselves can ruin a wise person. The invasion succeeds only when we mistake externals for the sovereign good. Remember, the wealth of the Stoic is not a balance in a ledger, but a balance in the soul. The Stoic security is not an immunization against suffering, but an orientation toward suffering that extracts meaning and refuses revolt against reality. This is not passivity. It is composure in motion. It allows one to take action with resolve and without vanity, to build, to refuse injustice, to comfort others, while remaining unentangled in the outcomes that lie beyond control. In this imagined letter, Seneca would urge moderation in all appetites, and not as an ascetic rule that denies the body at every turn, but as a fitting measure that keeps the mind unattached. Luxury is not poison unless it robs you of judgment. Poverty is not virtue unless it frees you from pretense. What matters is the dignity of your choices and the harmony between your life and your principles. He would remind us not to confuse novelty with learning. A person can scroll through pages and pages of ideas without grasping a single truth. To study is not to accumulate quotations, but to digest what sustains. Choose a few authors, he would say, and live with them. Choose a few principles and practice them until they profile your character. In this way, wisdom becomes embodied rather than recited. One of Seneca's lasting lessons concerns preparation for adversity. He did not instruct us to dread misfortune. He taught us to rehearse it in thought so that, should it arrive, we are not startled as if by lightning on a clear day. This premeditation does not darken life. It brightens it by giving contour to our blessings. Consider the loss of status, the tightening of money, the cooling of friendships, the crack of illness, the inevitability of death. Do not feed fear with vivid catastrophe, but ask yourself soberly, If this came to me, how would I respond? What resources would I marshal? Which virtues would I call upon? Courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom are not decorations on a mantle. They are instruments in the toolkit. Rehearsal is how they are sharpened. And yet, he would caution against the arrogance of self-sufficiency. The Stoic is not a solitary statue. We are born into relations and responsibilities. One of the most beautiful notes in Seneca's philosophy is his insistence on kindness. Even as he teaches detachment from outcomes, he insists on attachment to humanity. He writes often to Lucilius as a friend, urging progress while confessing his own imperfections. He urges generosity without calculation. You owe assistance not because the world will repay you, but because the act of helping forms your soul in accordance with nature's social order. The poor man you help today is not a debtor to you. He is a partner in the restoration of your own humanity. He would write, too, of anger. Few passions, he says, are as destructive and as seductive. Anger presents itself as justice accelerated, but it is often merely wounded pride adorned with moral language. Seneca's counsel for anger is not suppression through force, but dissolution through examination. Ask, what precisely have I judged to be an injury? Is the magnitude of my reaction equal to the harm? What is the intention of the person who acted? How would my best self respond if this were a friend, a stranger, or a child? Anger cannot be domesticated into a reliable tool, but indignation can be refined into principled action, a steady refusal to cooperate with wrongdoing, carried out without malice and without the fog that clouds decisions and spreads further harm. Seneca's final counsel, in this imagined summation, would not be merely personal. He would speak to leaders, to citizens, to artisans, to parents and students. He would say, negotiate the terms of your life with integrity. If you wield power, wield it with mercy. You are not a god merely entrusted with stewardship. If you are a citizen, remain watchful over your conscience. Do not sacrifice it for tribal comfort. If you labor with your hands, let your craft be a prayer of attention, for attention is a form of love. If you steward a family, know that your careful presence is a shelter that outlasts prosperity. To all, he would say, draw a circle of control and stand within it. Step out only when you intend to serve, and step back when you are tempted to control what cannot be commanded. He would reflect on the volatility of fortune. One day's favor is the next day's contempt. We imagine life as a ladder that we climb. Seneca suggests instead a wheel. If the wheel lifts you, do not seize the height as a right, for it will turn. If the wheel lowers you, do not regard the depth as permanent, for it will turn. In either case, do not lash your identity to the wheel. Stand inwardly apart, the way a helmsman rides the storm. He is not oblivious to the waves, but he refuses to be thrashed by them in imagination. He computes, he adjusts, he tightens the rope, and he orders his hands. Emotion becomes an instrument of awareness, not a regime. A crucial nuance in Seneca's thought is his recognition that philosophy is not a refuge for the pure. He writes as a man implicated in politics, wealth, and scandal. His teaching does not come from a remote monastery, but from public life. This gives his counsel a certain gravity. He asks us for improvement, knowing that complete perfection is beyond human reach. He confesses lapses, he acknowledges faults. There is a kind of moral tenderness in Seneca that keeps Stoicism from hardening into coldness. He is severe with errors, yet merciful with persons. That combination is instructive for us. Be strict with your standards and soft with people, including at times yourself. The standard is the star that guides. The softness is the wind that allows movement. Consider his attitude toward death, especially his own. When ordered to die, he did not thrash and beg. He gathered friends, dispensed counsel, performed the rites of a philosopher. He treated his death as an opportunity to demonstrate consistency. There is in this no morbid bravado, only fidelity. If you spend your life rehearsing wisdom, let your death be a final gesture of the same. For the living, the lesson is profound. Do not await a dramatic ending to validate your convictions. Practice now in small choices the alignment you admire. Pour moderation into your speech. Let patience guide your disappointments. Choose honesty where a half-truth would be applauded. Offer your attention in conversations as if time were weighty and you were entrusted with it. Seneca's letters repeatedly return to the idea that peace is available to those who refuse to lease their minds to public noise. It is possible to live quietly even in the city's tumult. This is not an argument for withdrawal from duty. It is counsel against forfeiting one's judgment. Turn away from the daily theater of outrage long enough to examine your own stage. Have you arranged your tasks, or are they arranging you? Have you decided what matters today, or are you collecting what splashed upon you from other people's momentum? Try the experiment. Before you open any channel of noise, ask what kind of day would be worthy of a finite creature granted breath and agency. Choose one act of learning, one act of service, one act of craft, and one act of rest. Write them down, then defend that list from incursion. He tells us also to travel internally. You may change cities and retain the same agitation, because the traveler you cannot escape is yourself. Relocation can be valuable, but transformation is a domestic affair. Examine, then, your habits of thought. Do you interpret ambiguity as threat? Do you confuse delay with disaster? Do you humiliate yourself with comparisons that disregard the true story of other people's lives? Seneca would urge correction through practice. Mark unhelpful inferences. Replace them with interpretations that honor reality and your agency. This is not the power of positive thinking. It is the discipline of accurate thinking. Optimism detached from truth is a sedative. Clarity is a tonic. One of the strongest threads in Seneca's moral fabric is the practice of gratitude. Not a sentimental gratitude that denies difficulty, but a robust acknowledgement that our very existence is gift. Even in adversity, there are helpers, resources, and capacities that sustain us. Gratitude keeps desire from mutiny. It recalibrates expectations to reality's scale. It reframes our achievements as co-productions with luck, culture, and the labor of others, which humbles us without flattening our initiative. To cultivate gratitude is to polish the lens through which you read your life, and a polished lens draws out more detail. You notice the patience in your mentor, the courage of your colleague, the quiet competence of the worker whose name you do not know. You treat people not as instruments of your advantage, but as co-travelers. Seneca knew, however, that gratitude alone does not stabilize a life. He urges us to bind gratitude to purpose. What will you do with what you have received? If you have been trusted with education, whom will you teach? If you have wealth, where will you infuse opportunity? If you have influence, how will you shelter the vulnerable? Gratitude without action is incomplete. Action without gratitude is restless. Integrating both is the Stoics' way of paying respect to fate while participating in law and justice. This is the highest expression of human freedom, to accept what you cannot choose and to serve intentionally with what you can. He would remind us that friendship is a kind of moral workshop. Choose companions who are serious about living well, not merely quick with flattery. A true friend comforts but also corrects. In Seneca's letters, you hear the tone of a man speaking to an equal, sometimes exhorting, sometimes confessing, always inviting. Recreate this environment in your own life, a circle where people are allowed to be flawed and encouraged to be better. Host a small gathering where each person brings a question that matters. Meet regularly not to perform success but to pursue truth. Let your friendships become the architecture that shelters your progress. He would tell us that life expects preparation, not perfection. Set routines that respect your body and your mind. Rise early enough to begin with reflection. Retire without leaving detritus for the morning. Practice something slowly every day, a scale, a paragraph, a sketch, a stretch. The slowness is the point. It is the antidote to the frenzy of a culture that confuses speed with worth. In the slow lane, attention has time to crystallize into mastery. And mastery, Seneca insists, is not about applause. It is about alignment between what you value and how you spend your time. Remember, too, that to be stoic is not to be unfeeling. It is to feel appropriately, to guide emotion into channels that irrigate virtue. Grief for a loved one is not a failure. It is a testimony to love. The Stoic grieves without becoming useless. He honors the dead by practicing what they taught and by caring for the living who remain. In joy, the Stoic does not tax happiness with fear of loss. He accepts it as a bright interval and lets it pass without clutching. In love, the Stoic does not try to possess. He commits with dignity and releases with dignity if required by fate. This manner of being appears severe to some, but it is, in fact, an art of fidelity, to truth, to others, and to one's best self. When Seneca considers wealth, he offers a clean distinction. Possession is not the problem. Dependence is. Own what you can lose with equanimity. Decline what would own you. Practice voluntary discomfort. Skip a meal. Walk instead of ride. Wear plain clothes. Sleep on a hard surface from time to time, not to punish yourself but to prove that you are free. Once you know you can dine on little and remain whole, extravagance loses its power to tame you. Once you can withstand a day without convenience, convenience becomes a blessing rather than a chain. This practice, small and regular, builds resilience. It is training for misfortune and an antidote to entitlement. Seneca's moral cosmology is simple. Nature has given you faculties. Use them for the common good. The faculty of reason to discern the true. The faculty of speech to elevate the civic conversation. The faculty of strength to protect. The faculty of imagination to create. The faculty of humor, when appropriate, to ease burdens. The faculty of tenderness to heal. A life is sufficient if these capacities are exercised with attention and integrity. The measure is not applause but fidelity. When you reach the end, what matters is not whether your name rests in history's book, but whether your character rests in harmony with nature's law. He would finally, in this part of his last letter, ask you to adopt one practice today and keep it faithfully. At day's end, review your conduct without cruelty. Where did you align with your values? Where did you stray? What pattern emerges? Then in the morning, write one sentence that can steer you. Today I will not surrender my mind to agitation. Today I will serve without seeking credit. Today I will say no to what confuses my priorities. A single sentence can anchor a day. A string of such days can anchor a life. This is how inspiration translates into habit, and habit into character. The Stoic path is narrow only because it is precise. Its reward is peace. Part 2, if Seneca could continue, if his hand had one more page, he would turn to the subjects that haunt us when the lights dim: meaning, fear, and the silent ledger by which we measure a life. He would not indulge in metaphysics beyond what serves conduct. His interest is less in the architecture of the universe than in the alignment of the person moving through it. He would begin by asking you to consider your definition of success. If success is applause, your peace will be an auction. If success is accumulation, your peace will be a vault with no key. If success is virtue, understood as the consistent choice of what is right, your peace will be a quiet discipline that nothing external can invade. Name this clearly. You cannot aim at what you have not defined. From this clarity flows a certain gentleness toward oneself. Self-contempt masquerades as rigor in many earnest people. They whip themselves for failures and call it conscience. Seneca's vision is sterner and kinder. He asks for rigorous self-examination paired with practical correction. You missed your mark today. Adjust your aim and fire again. You promised discipline and broke it. Reduce the promise to a tighter bound and keep it. You failed in courage. Take a small courageous act tomorrow and build from it. In this way, you stack evidence that you are becoming the person you intend to be. Stoicism is not about never falling. It is about falling less, rising quicker, and learning exactly where your foot slipped. He would then insist on clarity about fear. Fear often arises from ambiguity and anticipatory imagination. The way out is not to bully yourself into silence, but to interrogate the fear. What do you predict will happen? How likely is that outcome based on actual evidence? If it happened, what would be within your control? Which resources, friends, skills, institutions could you draw upon? Write this out. The act of writing shifts fear from a fog into discrete claims that can be evaluated. You will discover that most fears are compound, a kernel of reality surrounded by a husk of fantasy. Strip the husk. Train your mind to pause at the boundary of evidence. The result is not recklessness but steadiness. On meaning, Seneca's posture is both humble and demanding. He does not pretend that the universe owes you a role. He insists that you give yourself one. Purpose is a verb. It is not found by waiting for a revelation, but by committing to a direction and adjusting as you learn. Where do my capacities meet the world's needs in a way I can sustain? Start there. Over time, prune away what drains and reinforce what serves. The proof of purpose is not exhilaration. It is the sense of appropriate work. Think of a craftsperson at a bench, absorbed. This is not spectacle, it is fit. Seek fit more than fireworks. Fit can glow for decades. Fireworks exhaust the sky in seconds. Consider how Seneca approached the moral complexities of wealth. He earned, he gave, he was criticized. The lesson is not to retreat into purity competitions, but to use whatever station you inhabit for good. If you have little, share little and share wisely. If you have much and give strategically. Seneca would counsel anonymity when possible, not only to avoid praise but to safeguard the act from vanity. He would encourage building institutions, not just distributing gifts, schools, funds, shelters, clinics, arts organizations. Institutions outlive individual moods. They embed mercy into the culture's infrastructure. In your sphere, think institutionally. What can you build that will continue to serve when your hand is no longer on the lever? He would also return to the theme of mortality, not as a dirge but as a tutor. The awareness of death is not meant to sour life. It is meant to sweeten it by urgency. You will die. You do not know when. This is not a menace but a clarification. If you were immortal, procrastination would be merely inefficient. Given your finitude, procrastination is a theft. Set dates for what matters. Schedule conversations you have delayed. Begin the project you have rehearsed entirely in imagination. The first step need not be grand. It must be real. Give yourself small deadlines and keep them as sacred. This is how the vague someday becomes the definite today. On relationships, Seneca would tell you to cultivate a reputation for reliability. Be the person who shows up when you say you will. Keep confidences. Speak truth without theatrics. Do not flatter. Do not humiliate. When you err, confess promptly without staging a confession as a demand for absolution. Think of character as a credit score earned by steady payments. This reliability creates a field of trust in which others can flourish. You are not responsible for their choices, but you can create conditions where better choices are easier. This is a species of leadership available to every person, regardless of title. He would inquire into the noise that saturates modern life. If he warned of public entertainment in his time, what would he say of ours? He would ask you to ration your attention as a scarce resource. You cannot read everything, watch everything, comment on everything. Select a few sources that are consistently thoughtful, and ignore the rest. Create windows for news and windows for silence. Treat your mind as you would a child's diet. Sugar occasionally, nourishment regularly. When you feel the craving for distraction, practice micro-abstinence. 5 minutes of stillness before you indulge. Often the craving passes. If it does not, you at least prove that you are not entirely under compulsion. Seneca's counsel to leaders deserves emphasis. If you direct people, your virtues and vices scale. Your irritability multiplies. Your patience compounds. Your clarity prevents waste. Your confusion creates chaos. Therefore, attend to yourself first, not as an indulgence but as an obligation. Establish predictable processes. Communicate decisions with reasons. Invite dissent in good faith, and protect dissenters from retaliation. Promote on merit. Share credit lavishly and accept blame squarely. This is not only ethical, it is strategically sound. People will follow consistently fair leadership farther than they will follow brilliance choked by ego. Remember also that the leader's real unit of work is not a decision but a culture. Culture is formed by repeated acts observed. If you want a culture of candor, speak candidly and receive candor without rage. If you want a culture of learning, publicize your own corrections. To those outside formal leadership, Seneca would say, do not cede your agency. The person who perfects a small craft uplifts the whole. Bring excellence to the part you touch. A hospital porter who keeps instruments sterile saves lives. A coder who refuses to ship insecure software prevents future harm. A teacher who refuses cynicism plants forests in students' minds. The world is a tapestry stitched by unglamorous fidelity. Respect yourself by adding one clean stitch today. He would remind us that justice begins close to hand. Pay your debts. Return borrowed items. File your taxes honestly. Do not offload costs onto those without power to resist. If you run a company, do not calibrate wages by desperation but by dignity. If you design products, consider their downstream effects. What you ship becomes someone else's environment. The Stoic insists that virtue is not ceremonial. It is tangible. It is the weight of the scale set correctly, the document written plainly. The meeting concluded on time. The apology offered without bargaining. These quiet acts compose a life that can endure scrutiny from any angle. On learning, Seneca criticizes dilettantism and praises depth. It is better to understand a few principles thoroughly than to accumulate a trivia of doctrines. Choose a domain and seek mastery. Read primary sources instead of endless commentary. Attempt the exercise, not just the explanation. Teach what you know to test your understanding. Work examples by hand before automating. Your goal is not to become an encyclopedic spectacle, but a reliable instrument. Reliability is built on competence, and competence is built on mindful repetition. Let boredom become a signal not of futility, but of nearing the threshold where practice engraves skill onto your nervous system. He would address self-talk. The inner narrator that tells you who you are can be either a theatric tyrant or a sober mentor. Train it. When it declares disaster, ask for evidence. When it hurls insult, require precision. When it generalizes, you always or you never, respond with the record. This is cognitive hygiene. Just as you wash your hands to prevent infection, you wash your thoughts to prevent distortions from infecting judgment. Over time, you will notice that the inner voice becomes less shrill, more factual, and more helpful. It will begin to resemble the friend Seneca tried to be, firm, fair, and oriented toward your best interests. He would reflect on the rhythm of work and rest. Rest is not a reward for work. It is a component of excellence. Without it, your work degrades. Do not confuse exhaustion with virtue. Schedule rest with the same seriousness with which you schedule meetings. Protect sleep. Take walks. None of this is indulgence. It is maintenance of the instrument through which you serve. There is a dignity in refusing both idleness and mania. The middle path is not mediocrity. It is the line of optimal performance for a finite being. On failure, Seneca is direct. You will fail in public and in private. Do not compose a mythology around your failure that either exonerates you of responsibility or condemns you beyond repair. Inventory the causes, your actions, external conditions, luck. Adjust the part that is yours. If the failure was moral, repair harm if possible. If it was practical, change process. If it was due to luck, release the self-reproach and continue. Do not waste failure. It is an expensive teacher. Squeeze the lesson. Then let it move on, and move on yourself. He would also caution against the crusade to be understood. It is pleasant to be seen accurately, but it is not necessary for a good life. If you commit to living by principles, some will misread you. They will project motives or interpret restraint as coldness. Do not use your life energy to curate others' perceptions. Instead, be consistently yourself indeed and let time, if it cares, correct the record. Meanwhile, reserve your explanations for those who are genuinely curious or genuinely harmed by your ambiguity. This is economy of speech, and it keeps your mind for tasks that matter. Seneca would likely end his letter with a meditation on serenity, the calm that is not born of insulation, but of integration. Serenity arises when your beliefs, your habits, and your choices sing in the same key. It is the byproduct of having decided what to value and arranging your life accordingly. It cannot be purchased. It must be practiced into being. The practice is made of moments. The moment you choose restraint over a cutting remark. The moment you return a lost wallet without seeking thanks. The moment you begin the task you dread. The moment you accept correction without defensiveness. The moment you turn off the device and take a walk under a human sky. Let us condense the letter's counsel into a pattern you can hold. Guard your time as the currency of a finite life. Invest it in duty, learning, service, and rest. Build an inner citadel by directing attention, examining judgments, and rehearsing adversity. Treat others with kindness rooted in the recognition of shared vulnerability. Justice without cruelty. Cultivate friendships that support virtue. Be a reliable presence within them. Practice voluntary simplicity to prove freedom from dependence on externals. Align work with purpose. Pursue fit over spectacle and institutions over gestures. Speak truth, keep promises, and accept feedback. Let your character be the proof. Engage in daily review and single-sentence intention. Accrue integrity through repetition. Embrace mortality as a clarifier. Begin now and set dates for what matters. Hold serenity as the fruit of alignment, not as an escape from life. If you adopt even one of these strands and weave it daily, you will notice a shift. The same world will feel different because you will be different in it. Agitations will still arrive, but they will no longer dictate terms. Praise and blame will still circulate, but they will not determine your aim. Loss will still hurt, but it will not ruin you. This is the freedom Seneca offers. Not immunity, but composure. Not control over events, but mastery of response. As we step away from this imagined last letter, remember that Seneca's life was no pristine pedestal. He was entangled. He sometimes failed the ideals he professed. The force of his counsel does not depend on his perfection. Depends on the accuracy of his insights and their capacity to elevate our conduct. In that spirit, take what is useful, test it in your days, and leave the rest. Philosophy should be judged at the point of use. When it helps you speak more gently, work more steadily, love more attentively, and stand more courageously, it has justified its place. There is one more thing he would ask you to do. Choose someone to whom you will be accountable for your intention. Share your single sentence for tomorrow. Report back the next day. Accountability is the trellis upon which habit climbs. Without it, intentions wilt. With it, they reach light. If you cannot find a person, write to yourself and seal it. Open the letter in a week. Do not rely on mood. Rely on structure. Structure is the ally of virtue. Finally, when you are tempted to despair at the state of the world, remember Seneca's scale of control. Begin with yourself. Clean your room, your calendar, your conscience. Then extend outward. Help a neighbor, assist a colleague, support a local effort. Then extend again. Vote, volunteer, build. This scaling keeps you from paralysis. It also protects you from the vanity of grand gestures unsupported by private discipline. The world is improved by citizens who are good at small things consistently. Become such a citizen. It is within your reach and within your duty. If these reflections have steadied you or given you a path to begin, carry them into action. The letter ends, but the day begins. Let your choices today be a tribute to the finite, luminous gift of life, spent wisely, courageously, and generously. And as you walk, know that you are joining a long line of people who, like Seneca, have tried to live with virtue under imperfect skies. This lineage is open to all who choose it. Choose it now.